The midnight visitor Darzo Va'bon, supreme commander of the Azarian Empire and seventh of his bloodline, had always prided himself on his security measures. His palace stood at the heart of the capital city, surrounded by walls that had never been breached in 3 centuries. Tonight, however, something felt wrong. The silence woke him. For someone who had spent 40 cycles sleeping in the most secure location in the Empire, the absence of sound was more alarming than any explosion. The constant hum of surveillance systems, the distant footsteps of guards, the gentle whir of air circulation, all of it had vanished into an unnatural quiet that pressed against his ear membranes like physical weight. Darzo remained perfectly still. A skill drilled into him since youth, his 4 eyes adjusted to the darkness, scanning the familiar contours of his sleeping chamber. Everything appeared normal. The heavy curtains hung undisturbed. The sealed doorway showed no signs of tampering. The emergency communication panel on the wall displayed its usual soft glow, yet something was fundamentally wrong. "Good evening, Commander," a voice said from the shadows. Darzo's blood turned cold. The voice spoke in perfect Azarian, though the accent carried strange inflections he had only heard in intercepted communications from the front lines. His training took over, and he activated the emergency beacon implanted in his forearm with a subtle muscle contraction. Nothing happened. "I disconnected that about 20 minutes ago," the voice continued, conversational and almost friendly, along with every other electronic system in this wing of the palace. "I hope you don't mind. I needed us to have an honest conversation without interruptions." A figure stepped from the corner, moving with fluid grace that seemed impossible for any species Darzo knew. As it entered the faint light from the window, he saw the distinctive form of a human. The creature stood upright on 2 legs, wearing dark clothing that seemed to absorb light itself. Its face was partially covered, revealing only 2 forward-facing eyes that gleamed with intelligence. "You are a Terran," Darzo said, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his chest. "Guilty as charged," the human replied. It moved closer, and Darzo noticed how silently it walked, like a predator from the old stories his mother used to tell. "My name is Alex Chen, though I don't suppose that matters much to you. I'm here representing the Terran Confederacy, though I suspect you weren't expecting diplomatic outreach quite like this." Darzo sat up slowly, gathering the thermal blankets around him. The gesture was instinctive, defensive, and he immediately regretted showing such weakness. "There is a war between our peoples. You are an enemy combatant in the heart of my empire. The fact that you speak does not change what you are." "True," Alex agreed, pulling a small device from a pocket and examining it. "Though I think the more interesting question is how an enemy combatant managed to get into the heart of your empire." "Don't you?" The human had a point. Darzo's mind raced through the layers of security. The palace was defended by the Imperial Guard, 300 of the finest warriors in the empire, each one willing to die before allowing harm to reach their commander. Beyond them, the city garrison numbered 50,000 soldiers, all on high alert since the war began 6 months ago. The palace itself was a fortress with walls reinforced by composite materials that could withstand orbital bombardment. And yet, this human stood in his bedroom having somehow bypassed everything. "How did you get in here?" Darzo demanded. Alex tilted its head, a gesture that seemed almost amused. "Well, that's the thing, Commander. Your security is actually quite impressive by most standards. The walls are thick, the guards are alert, and your surveillance systems are top of the line. You've invested considerable resources into keeping yourself safe." The human paused, pulling out a thin blade and examining it in the dim light. The casual way it handled the weapon made Darzo's skin prickle. "But all of that security has a fundamental flaw," Alex continued. "It's designed to stop Azarians and species like you. It's built around the assumption that threats move and think in certain ways. You patrol in patterns, you rely on technology. You build walls because walls have always kept you safe. And humans move differently," Darzo said quietly, understanding beginning to dawn. "Exactly." The blade disappeared back into a pocket. "We've spent most of our evolutionary history as both predator and prey. We learned to be patient, to move in darkness, to exploit weaknesses that others don't even recognize as weaknesses. Your sensors are excellent at detecting heat, movement, and electromagnetic signatures, but they're not so good at detecting someone who's been lying motionless in your ventilation system for 18 hours, barely breathing, waiting for the perfect moment. Darzo felt his secondary hearts begin to race. 18 hours? Give or take. I actually got into the palace 3 days ago. I've been living in the spaces between your walls, watching, learning, waiting. Your guards are disciplined, I'll give you that. But they walk the same routes at the same times. Your surveillance systems have predictable sweep patterns. And your architects never considered that someone might be small enough and flexible enough to navigate the maintenance conduits. The human moved to the window, looking out over the illuminated city below. I've walked past your guards 17 times. I stood behind one of them for a full minute, while he stared at a monitor showing the corridor he thought he was protecting. I ate in your kitchen, showered in your guest facilities, and even took a nap in your daughter's library yesterday afternoon while she was at her music lessons. Darzo's 4 eyes widened in horror. My daughter is perfectly safe, Alex interrupted. I'm not here to hurt anyone, Commander. I'm here to deliver a message, and that message needed to be delivered in a way that would make you truly understand it. What message? Darzo asked, though part of him already knew. The human turned back to face him, and for the first time, Darzo saw something that might have been pity in those alien eyes. The message is simple. You cannot win this war. The Azarian Empire is powerful, vast, and technologically advanced. Your fleets outnumber ours 10 to 1. Your industrial capacity exceeds ours by a significant margin. By every conventional metric, you should be able to crush humanity within a year. Alex walked closer, and Darzo resisted the urge to retreat further into his bed. But wars aren't won by conventional metrics alone, the human continued. They're won by will, by adaptation, by the ability to do what your enemy doesn't expect. Your military thinks in terms of fleet battles and territorial control. You fight wars the way you've always fought them. Massive forces meeting in predetermined locations, with victory going to whoever has more ships and better technology. The human paused, letting the silence stretch. Humans fight differently. We fight with patience and creativity. We don't need to destroy your fleets if we can make you afraid to leave your planets. We don't need to conquer your worlds if we can make you question whether any location is truly secure. We don't need overwhelming force if we can get into the bedrooms of your leaders and make them understand that walls mean nothing. Darzo absorbed this, his analytical mind working through the implications. You are saying your strategy is terror. No, Alex said firmly. Terror is indiscriminate violence meant to intimidate through fear. What I'm describing is precision. It's sending a message that matters to the people who need to hear it, in a way that makes them truly listen. The human pulled out a small data chip and placed it on the bedside table. That contains detailed information about the war effort, our casualties, our limitations, our genuine desire to avoid further conflict. We didn't start this war, Commander. Your empire expanded into what you considered unclaimed territory. Unfortunately for you, humans had already established colonies in 3 of those systems. We defended ourselves, and now you've escalated into a full conflict. Darzo stared at the chip. Why tell me this? Because you have the power to end it, Alex said simply. You're not just the supreme commander of military forces. You're the head of the Imperial Council. Your word carries weight that no one else's does. You can call for a ceasefire, open negotiations, and save countless lives on both sides. And if I refuse? The human's expression hardened slightly. Then this war continues, and it will go very badly for your empire. Not because we're stronger, we're not. Not because we have better technology, we don't. But because we're willing to do things that your people haven't even imagined yet. Alex moved back toward the shadows from which it had emerged. Tonight, I got into your bedroom. Tomorrow, I could get into your military command centers. Next week, I could disable your communication satellites. Next month, I could contaminate your food supplies or shut down your power grids. And I'm just one person, Commander. There are thousands of us, and we're very, very patient. This is a threat, Darzo said, though his voice lacked conviction. This is a warning, Alex corrected. There's a difference. A threat is what you make before you act. A warning is what you give someone when you genuinely hope they'll make the right choice and spare everyone the consequences. The human was fading back into the darkness now, becoming one with the shadows. You have 1 week to consider your options, Commander. Call for a ceasefire, open diplomatic channels, or at minimum pull your forces back to pre-conflict borders. Show good faith and we'll meet you halfway. But if you choose to continue this war, if you choose pride over pragmatism, then what happened tonight will seem like a pleasant dream compared to what comes next. Darzo found his voice. How do I contact you? You don't, Alex said, now just a voice in the darkness. If you make the right choice, we'll know. And if you make the wrong choice, well, you won't need to contact us. We'll already be there." The human vanished completely, and a moment later the familiar hum of the palace's systems resumed. Lights flickered, displays powered back up, and somewhere in the distance Darzo heard the confused voices of guards trying to understand what had just happened to their equipment. He sat in his bed for a long moment, staring at the data chip on his nightstand. Part of him wanted to believe it had all been a hallucination, a stress-induced dream brought on by the pressures of command. But the chip was real, and the message was clear. Darzo Va'bon had built his entire career on strategic thinking and careful analysis of threats. As he sat in the darkness, surrounded by security systems that had proven utterly useless, he realized something that chilled him more than the human's presence had. If humans could do this, infiltrate the most secure location in the Empire, stand in his bedroom and deliver their message with impunity, then what else were they capable of? What other assumptions about security, about warfare, about power itself, were nothing more than comfortable illusions? He reached for the data chip, his primary hand trembling slightly. Whatever it contained, he knew his world had fundamentally changed. The question was whether he had the courage to change with it, or whether pride would doom his empire to a war it could never truly win. The morning sun was beginning to rise over the capital city, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Darzo Va'bon watched it through his window, wondering if he was seeing the dawn of a new era or the beginning of the end. The choice at dawn, the morning light revealed what the darkness had hidden. Darzo Va'bon stood in his sleeping chamber, examining the room with fresh eyes as a team of security specialists worked around him. The chief of palace security, a grizzled veteran named Krelth, moved methodically through the space with scanning equipment that beeped and whirred. "Commander," Krelth said, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration, "I don't understand how this is possible. The surveillance footage from last night shows nothing. No entries, no exits, no movement in this corridor whatsoever. Yet every system in this wing was disabled for exactly 43 minutes. Darzo picked up the data chip from his nightstand, turning it over in his hands. It was standard technology, unremarkable in every way except for what it represented. Proof that last night had been horrifyingly real. "Show me the ventilation systems," Darzo said quietly. Krelth's skin pigmentation shifted to a pale yellow, indicating confusion. "Commander? The maintenance conduits, the air circulation passages, the spaces between walls. Show me everything that connects to this room." An hour later, Darzo found himself in the bowels of the palace, crawling through passages he never knew existed. The maintenance tunnels were narrow, barely large enough for an Azarian child, let alone an adult. But a human, he realized, with their compact skeletal structure and flexible joints, could navigate these spaces with relative ease. They found evidence everywhere once they knew what to look for. Scuff marks on metal surfaces, disturbed dust patterns, a discarded food wrapper from the kitchen stores hidden in a corner junction. Most damning of all, they found a small camping mat and a container of water tucked into an alcove, near the main security hub, a makeshift observation post with a perfect view of the guard rotation schedules displayed on nearby monitors. 3 days, Darzo muttered, staring at the evidence. The human was here for 3 days and we never noticed. Krelth looked physically ill. "Commander, I take full responsibility. I will submit my resignation immediately." "No," Darzo said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "This isn't about failure of duty. This is about fundamental misconceptions. We built our security around known threats and we encountered something we never imagined. The question now is what we do about it." He climbed out of the maintenance tunnel, brushing dust from his formal robes. "Convene the Imperial Council in 2 hours, and send a message to my daughter. Tell her I need to speak with her immediately, privately." Princess Sela Va'bon arrived at her father's private study within minutes. At 23 cycles, she was young for an Azarian noble, but she carried herself with the dignity expected of her position. Her 4 eyes, however, showed worry as she entered the room. "Father, the guard said it was urgent." Darzo gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Last night I had a visitor, a human operative who somehow infiltrated the palace and entered my sleeping chamber. Before leaving, the human mentioned you, said something about giving you a fright by taking a wrong door." Sela's skin shifted through several colors. Surprise, then recognition, then something that might have been embarrassment. She sat down slowly. That was real? She asked softly. Darzo leaned forward. You saw the human too? 2 days ago, Sela confirmed. I was in the Eastern Library reading before dinner. I looked up and there was someone standing by the window. At first I thought it was one of the servants, but then I realized the proportions were all wrong. It was a human dressed in dark clothing just watching me. What happened? Sela's voice trembled slightly at the memory. I was about to call for guards when the human put a finger to its lips, a gesture requesting silence. Then it spoke, saying, Your father keeps you well protected, princess, but walls only keep out those who respect walls. It walked past me, close enough that I could have touched it and left through the doorway. By the time I gathered my courage to follow, it had vanished. The corridor was empty, and the guard stationed at both ends hadn't seen anything. She looked at her father with haunted eyes. I convinced myself I had imagined it. The stress of the war, perhaps, or too much time spent reading invasion scenarios. But it was real, wasn't it? It was all real. Darzo nodded grimly. Very real. And the message it delivered to me suggests this is far more serious than a simple infiltration. He explained the events of the previous night, watching as his daughter processed the information. Sela had always been the most intellectually curious of his offspring, the one who asked difficult questions and challenged conventional thinking. Now he saw that same analytical mind working through the implications. So the human wasn't here to kill us, Sela said finally. It was here to prove that it could. To make us understand that our security is an illusion. Exactly. And to deliver a warning about the war. Sela stood and walked to the window overlooking the palace courtyard. Below, guards drilled in perfect formation, their movements synchronized and disciplined. They looked formidable, an expression of military might that had protected the empire for generations. Father, she said quietly, what if the human is right? What if we cannot win this war? The question hung in the air between them. It was the same question Darzo had been wrestling with since dawn, the thought that challenged everything he believed about Azarian superiority and military doctrine. Our fleets are superior, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Our technology is more advanced. Our industrial capacity means nothing if humans can walk through our defenses as if they don't exist, Sela interrupted. She turned to face him. Think about it, father. If one human can infiltrate the imperial palace, what could 100 do? What could 1,000 do? They wouldn't need to defeat our fleets in open battle. They could sabotage our supply lines, disable our infrastructure, eliminate key personnel. They could wage a war we're not equipped to fight. Darzo felt the weight of command settling more heavily on his shoulders. The council will want to escalate. When they learn that a human breached our security, they'll see it as a humiliation that demands response. They'll call for increased military action, for strikes against human worlds. Which is exactly what the humans would want, Sela said, because escalation plays to their strengths. The more we commit to conventional warfare, the more opportunities we create for them to use unconventional tactics against us. Father and daughter looked at each other, and in that moment Darzo saw not just his child, but a potential successor who understood the changing nature of power in the galaxy. You think I should accept their terms, he said. I think you should at least listen to what they have to say, Sela replied. That data chip the human left, have you examined it yet? Darzo pulled the chip from his pocket and inserted it into his desk console. The holographic display flickered to life, showing detailed reports on human casualties, resource expenditures, and strategic assessments. The information was shockingly transparent, revealing both human strengths and weaknesses with apparent honesty. What struck Darzo most was a personal message embedded in the files, a video recording of a human military commander addressing the camera directly. Commander Va'bon, the human said, my name is General Sarah Chen, Alex is my nephew, and what he did last night was unauthorized by official channels, though I can't say I disapprove of the results. We're sending you this information because we believe you're intelligent enough to understand the reality of our situation. The general's image shifted, replaced by tactical displays and casualty reports. We've lost 3 colonies and 17,000 civilians to your initial attacks. Our military forces are outnumbered and outgunned. In a conventional war, we would lose. But humans learned long ago that conventional wars are only one type of conflict. We've also become very good at asymmetric warfare, at finding and exploiting weaknesses, at turning our enemies' strengths into liabilities. The general's face returned to the screen, and Darzo was struck by the weariness in her eyes. I don't want to fight this war, Commander. None of us do. But if forced to choose between extinction and doing whatever it takes to survive, humans will always choose survival. And our definition of whatever it takes is extensive. The video ended, leaving Darzo staring at the empty display. The message was clear. Humans were offering him a choice between a negotiated peace and a nightmare conflict that would destroy both civilizations. 2 hours later, the Imperial Council assembled in the main chamber. 12 senior officials representing the military, the nobility, and the administrative branches of government took their seats around the circular table. The atmosphere was tense, rumors of the security breach having spread throughout the palace. Fleet Admiral Torak spoke first, his voice booming across the chamber. Commander, we've heard disturbing reports about an intruder in the palace. If this is true, it represents an unacceptable breach that demands immediate military response. It's true, Darzo said simply. A human operative spent 3 days inside our walls, gathering intelligence and demonstrating the inadequacy of our security measures. Last night, this operative entered my sleeping chamber and delivered a message from the Terran Confederacy. The council erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped, some calling for blood, others demanding investigations, still others expressing disbelief. Darzo let them vent for several minutes before raising a hand for silence. The human's message was simple: end the war now, or face a conflict we're not prepared to fight. I've reviewed the intelligence they provided, and I believe we must take their warning seriously. Admiral Torak slammed a fist on the table. This is cowardice. One infiltrator succeeds, and you want to surrender to these primitives? I'm not suggesting surrender, Darzo said calmly. I'm suggesting we reassess our strategic position based on new intelligence. We've been treating humans as if they're simply another conventional military power, but the evidence suggests there's something very different. He activated the council chamber's main display, showing footage from the palace security analysis, images of the maintenance tunnels, the hidden observation post, the paths the human had taken through supposedly secure areas. This operative moved through our defenses as if they didn't exist, Darzo continued, not because our guards were incompetent, but because humans approach security differently than we do. They see vulnerabilities where we see solid walls. They exploit assumptions we don't even know we're making. Minister of Intelligence Vorna leaned forward, her analytical mind already working through the implications. You're saying this isn't about military strength. It's about methodology. Exactly. We can build higher walls, post more guards, install better sensors, but all of that is reactive, based on defending against known threat patterns. Humans specialize in becoming unknown threats. They're patient, creative, and willing to operate in ways we consider beneath the dignity of warfare. He paused, letting his words sink in. If we continue this war, we won't face fleets and armies. We'll face shadows and uncertainty. We'll face enemies who can strike anywhere at any time in ways we can't predict or prevent. Our soldiers won't know which of their comrades might be compromised. Our leaders won't sleep soundly, knowing that locked doors mean nothing. Our entire society will live in fear of an enemy that could be anywhere. The council chamber fell silent as the members absorbed this grim assessment. Finally, Lord Chancellor Mevrak spoke, his voice measured and thoughtful. What you're describing is a form of warfare that the Azarian Empire has never encountered. Our military traditions are built on honor, on direct confrontation between matched forces. If humans don't respect these traditions, they don't, Darzo interrupted. And why should they? We invaded their territory. They're fighting for survival, and survival doesn't require honor. It requires victory by any means necessary. Admiral Torax wasn't ready to concede. Even accepting your analysis, Commander. How can we negotiate from a position of weakness? If we offer peace now, we signal that intimidation works. Other species will see us as vulnerable. Darzo had anticipated this argument. Or they'll see us as wise enough to avoid a war we can't win on favorable terms. There's no shame in recognizing a superior tactical position and adapting accordingly. The shame would be in sacrificing millions of lives because we're too proud to acknowledge reality. He stood, addressing the council with the full weight of his authority. I'm calling for an immediate ceasefire and the opening of diplomatic channels with the Terran Confederacy. We'll propose a return to pre-conflict borders with a demilitarized zone between our territories. We'll offer reparations for the human colonies we damaged and negotiate a long-term peace treaty that respects both our interests." "And if they refuse?" Vorna asked. "Then at least we tried. But I don't think they will refuse. The intelligence they provided suggests they've suffered heavy casualties too. They want peace as much as we do. The difference is they're willing to fight in ways we can't match if peace isn't possible." The vote took an hour of heated debate, but in the end, pragmatism won over pride. The Imperial Council authorized Darzo to pursue peace negotiations with the humans, though several members made their disapproval clear. As the council members filed out, Selah appeared at her father's side. "You did the right thing," she said quietly. "I hope so," Darzo replied, feeling the exhaustion of the past day catching up with him. "But I suspect the truly difficult work is just beginning. Making peace with an enemy is always harder than making war." That night, Darzo sat in his study, composing the message that would be transmitted to human territories. He chose his words carefully, acknowledging the conflict while proposing a path forward. As he worked, he found himself thinking about Alex Chen, the human who had walked through his palace like a ghost. In a strange way, he was grateful to the human. Without that terrifying demonstration, he might have continued the war, confident in his Aryan superiority, until it was too late to stop. Sometimes, he reflected, the greatest service someone could provide was showing you the truth you didn't want to see. 3 days later, a response arrived from the Terran Confederacy. They accepted the ceasefire and proposed a meeting location for formal negotiations. The message was professional and diplomatic, but at the end, there was a brief personal note addressed to Darzo. "Thank you for choosing wisdom over pride. My nephew tells me you're a good leader who loves his family. That's something we can respect. Let's build a peace that protects all our families." General Saracen Darzo read the note 3 times, then carefully filed it away. The war was ending, but a new relationship was beginning. One built not on assumed superiority, but on mutual respect born from honest recognition of each other's capabilities. He walked to the window, looking out over his city as the sun set. Somewhere out there, humans were probably already withdrawing their covert operatives, preparing for peace instead of continued conflict. He would never know how many had been in his empire, how close to disaster they had truly come. And perhaps, he thought, that was exactly the point. Some fears were healthy, some respect well-earned. The Azarian Empire had learned a hard lesson about the nature of power in a changing galaxy, but they had learned it in time.